Hello, David Clarke here from DVC Training. In this video, I'm going to go through how I set up to do colourising inside of wan2gp, which isn't immediately obvious because there isn't any option in there to do it. In previous videos, I talked about using wan2gp through Pinokio. I'm going to do exactly the same here. So here I am in Pinokio, just going to start up wan2gp. As soon as I get to this screen, the first thing I would do is just click the update button, just to make sure there aren't any updates. You don't have to do it every single time, but they do keep updating it, so it's worth doing it a couple of times a week. As you can see here, there was some kind of little update there because something happened. It produced some stuff on screen. Once it's finished updating, then you can go ahead and just plain start it. Obviously, the updating will depend on how much there is to update and how good your internet is, because it's all coming down from the internet. But I do generally find they take 5-10 minutes probably. Now I've got back to this screen, I'm going to click start and I will get into wan2gp itself. Again, as I mentioned in previous videos, this bit takes a little bit of time. On this particular machine, it only takes a minute or two. In another machine that I use it on, it takes 4 or 5 minutes. And here I am into the current version of wan2gp as of the beginning of July. Like I said, they keep updating it all the time. So as before, you've got a whole bunch of different tabs. I'm going to be using the media generator and the media flow. In my previous videos, this was called something else. They've now changed it to media flow. But this is the tab I was using to go through and do the outpainting in previous videos. And this is also where I tend to do most of the colourising. Now, the advantage I think you get over using this page as opposed to that one is this will let you do long clips, whereas this has a limit of how long the clips can be. And I do use both, and I'll show you that in a second. Of course, this one you can do all sorts of things on. So there's all these different drop downs, all these different models, loads and loads of things I haven't done any videos about yet. So what I want to do is to take a black and white image and then change it into a color image. When you come in here, there is no option in here to do that. It's using a thing made by this company LTX. It's called a Lora, which lets you colorize it, but it just doesn't pop up as a default. So what you're going to do is add in your own settings and then it will pop up as a default. You can see I've made several here. So how do you make your own settings to do that? You do that by going to the Media Generator tab. Now, like I said, this can do all sorts of things. It can take images and generate video from them. It can take videos and do stuff to the video. It can do loads and loads of AI stuff. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to put it onto 2.23 22B and distilled 1.1. And these are just different variations of this LTX stuff. LTX is a particular type of AI. These are all other types of AI. LTX is the one I'm using, and version 2.3 is when it's got really, really good. As you can see, there's even different versions of 2.3 here, which you'd use for other stuff. And distilled, as opposed to not distilled, means that you're using a version which has been cut down a bit, so that you can use it in a graphics card that hasn't got so much memory. You still need quite a bit of memory. The lowest I've used this on is a graphics card, which is an NVIDIA 3060 with 12 gigabytes of RAM. Seen some people saying they're using it on 8 gigabytes of RAM, but I think you're really making it work too hard if you go any lower than that. So you do need a fairly up-to-date graphics card with a decent amount of RAM on it. And for example, I've got a 2080 8-bit graphics card in one of my computers, and I haven't even tried using that. And that was a graphics card that only a few years ago would have cost a couple of £1,000. I'm not bothering to use that. I'm using more up-to-date ones. If you have a thing with higher memory, you can use one of the not distilled versions, which should be a bit better. But I haven't been able to try that because my graphics card isn't good enough. So the next thing you got to do is come down here and set up some settings. You see it's already got some stuff in here. It's got a prompt down here to generate a piece of video completely from scratch. Again, I'm not going to go into that right here. What I want to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go to Control Process and choose this one, LTX2 Raw Format Control Video for IC Lora. And then pop a bit further down. Here I'm going to go and click on this and say Generate Video based on Control Video and its text prompt. And then this is the text prompt, and I'm going to change that just to colorize this clip. I'm putting it in American, colorize, as opposed to English, just in case, because obviously most of this stuff is written by Americans. Then I'm going to pop down here and go to the size. This is trained to do standard definition clips. Obviously you're colorizing something, there's a reason it's black and white in the first place. Very probably it's some old TV program or film that you'd like to watch in colour. Not many of us have been filming in black and white unless we really want to, and if you really wanted to film in black and white, why are you going to bother to colourize it? So this is why it's been trained on standard definition stuff. Now, all of my stuff that I've actually been putting through this has been 4x3 and has been PAL, so 768 by 576. And out of all these settings, I'm leaving it on 480p, and I'm going to come in here and choose a 4x3 one. So you can see that's 576. It's got 832 there because, again, it does seem to do peculiar sizes. You know, proper 4x3 square pixels is 768 by 576. And this goes 832. I'm not sure why, but it does mean I still have to afterwards take the video and slightly change the size of it. But for my 4x3 stuff, I choose that. If I'm doing 16 by 9, I choose that one, 960 by 512. Now, like I said, most of the stuff I've been doing has been 4x3. For the examples I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to make 16 by 9 stuff. Because, of course, pretty much all of the black and white stuff I've got is copyright of somebody else. So what I've done is taken some regular footage and made it black and white. Now down here you have a little slider to say how long the thing is that you're going to create. Now you'll notice that slider goes up to 30 seconds as the longest clip that this can create. But because I'm trying to make up a preset to use in the media flow tab, this actually doesn't make any difference, because the media flow tab can do as long as you like. So far I've literally put in a very simple prompt, chosen a couple of things and chosen the resolution I'm doing. And then I'm going to come down here to advanced mode. Now, if this isn't ticked, tick it so you can get to these settings. So there's a couple of tabs you've got to fiddle with here. First is general. Now on the general tab, I'll talk about the seed a little bit later on, but leave that at -1 for the moment. The most important thing is go from 2 phases to 1 phase. I mean, you can try 2 phases, it just tends to produce more peculiar results than 1 phase. Next thing is go to Loras, and where it says activated Lora here, right click and you get a list of all the Loras that you can add in. Now Loras are just extra ways of doing stuff. So there are lots of things here like the outpainting and the detailing, and here you've got the colorizer. So you just right click on that and choose colorizer, and it pops it in down here. And then click away from it. Whatever you do, don't click that X button, you'll get rid of it, but click away from it, and now you've got the colorizing Lora in there. The other thing you've got to do on the Lora is come down here and type in a multiplier. Now the multiplier decides how much the Lora affects the video. And 1 basically means it doesn't do very much. 2 means it does an awful lot. The sweet spot seems to be about 1.35 or 1.4. I'm going to put in 1.35. Again, you could make up different presets with different settings and see what works for you, but I think 1.35 is a pretty good setting. Then pop along to quality. Now on quality, you've got a couple of options. You can leave it disabled, which is what I'd suggest you do to start off with because it's the fastest option. But you can get slightly better quality by choosing one of these two. Generally, I've chosen that one and I haven't tested this one properly yet. There are also other things down here which you can do with that. And I haven't properly tested those either. I'd suggest you start on disabled for the moment because as soon as you start adding things into it, it's going to take longer to do stuff. Go to sliding window. And on the sliding window here, take this frames overlap and whack it down to 1. What a sliding window is if you're doing a long clip, it'll chop it up into smaller chunks, which is the sliding window. That's the amount it chops it up into. And every time it does a new chunk, it might do something slightly different. So if you have an overlap, so have a bigger overlap, 17 frames is practically a second. So if you're chopping it up into 10-second chunks, that means you're doing an extra second every time you do a little bit of the clip. It's obviously going to take longer, but the idea is by overlapping a bit like that, it's going to smooth out the join if there is one. Again, you can fiddle around with that to your heart's content and see if you produce a better result. Put it down to 1, that works most of the time. And then again, this is only important if you're doing long video. If you're doing something that's, say, a bit shorter, then it won't really affect it. Like it won't really affect the clip I'm trying to do because my clip's 8 seconds long. But for a start off, stick it down to 1. Here it's been on the general tab, put it onto 1 phase. On the Lora, add in the colorizing Lora. On the sliding window, stick it down to 1. And now, come back up to the top and save it. So I've got to come up here and type in a name. So basically click on it and start typing. I'm going to call this... Now this can be in English. And then I'm going to click save. And it comes up with this message saying, do you really want to save it? Yep, go ahead and save it. And now I've made up a preset that says that. Well, now if I come to Media Flow, click on the model down here and say Add User Settings, if it's not already selected. And then here it will automatically choose the preset that you've just made. If not, you can click on that and choose any of the presets you've made. These are all different colorizing presets. You can see I've done all sorts of lots of different things. But literally, I've made up my own presets. I'm now ready to use it. Another thing that's got put in since the outpainting video I did was that in this window here, you've now got one item or batch. So here you can do one thing at a time, or you can feed it with a whole bunch of clips. I'm going to do one item here first, but maybe I'll do a bunch of clips later on. Of course, whenever I change something here, it kind of forgets stuff. So I've got to come back here, add user settings, make sure I'm on that. Now, the next thing you need to do is tell it what file you're using. So this bit is the same as it was before. You're going to go off, find the footage that you've got made up. I am going to take a clip that you've already seen, probably if you've seen any of my other videos, which I've made standard definition in black and white, and use that. So take that clip, right click, choose copy as path. Come back to Pinokio, paste it in here. Get rid of the quotation mark. Then you can either leave it to make up its own name, or you could take that and put in a path and give it a specific name. Another thing worth mentioning here is that now you can do different formats for output rather than MP4. So if I go to configuration and then outputs, you can see I've actually set my outputs to be QuickTime ProRes. So the default's always MP4s, but because I'm going to be using this in editing later on, I'd quite like to make some ProRes stuff. So I come in here, set MOV, ProRes. I set the sound to be high quality AAC. I'd prefer to do a completely lossless, but that doesn't seem to be an option yet. Set that and save settings. Come back to my Media Flow tab, and I've got to change the end of this to MOV. So I have to do that every time. I actually have to change it to MOV because I like to make MOV files. If I hadn't set that output, then I wouldn't have to bother about that. But I like to do it simply because I think ProRes MOV files are less compressed and much better for editing later on. So far I've told it what I'm going to do, where I'm going to stick it. I've then got to choose the resolution, which is 540p. The strength here you can see is set to 1.35. Now I set it when I saved the preset, so it should come up with 1.35 automatically, but of course you can change it. So you could just run that and then give it a different output name and run it again with a different setting to see what it comes out like. But it'll come up automatically with whatever you actually set when you save the preset. Then you've got the chunk size. Again, I mentioned this in the previous video, but when you get long videos, it can't do the whole thing in one go. Now, what your chunk size is going to depend on your graphics card. Bigger chunks it can do, the better, because there's always a possibility that at a chunk you'll get a slight mess up in the picture quality. You can adjust this sliding window overlap so it does a bit on either side of the join and tries to smooth it out. But ideally you do that so it's as big as possible. Now I found with my particular graphics card I can get away with 10 seconds, so I'm leaving it at 10 seconds. The only way you're going to find out is to start it going with some number in there and put it into like 20 seconds and it'll probably come up and say, sorry, run out of RAM at some point. So it's a bit of experimentation, but I found 10 seconds works well for my graphics card. This clip, I did a short clip for demonstration purposes, so the clip's only about 4 seconds anyway, so that really doesn't matter. But obviously if I was doing a proper clip, a long clip, then that would matter. So I've now got 540p, chunk size, 1.35. It says colorize clip, and I'm going to click start process and let it get on with it. And it comes up with these couple of messages. This is probably the most annoying one, the fact that it drops the last 4 frames. It always drops a certain number of frames at the end of everything. It's doing it because the number of frames it's processing has to be in a certain multiple of something or other. But it's always annoying that it drops a bit, so I always have to put a little bit of head and tails on there. I mean, if I'm doing an entire movie, it's all right, I just pop the whole movie in and it loses 4 frames of black at the end of it. But when I'm doing something like this, I put some heads and tails on it. But anyway, now what I've got to do is let it get on with it. So the very first time it does this, it has to actually load up this LTX model, which is a fairly big thing, into RAM. So that takes a bit of time, and then it will get on and process it for you. So we're going to have to wait for that actually to happen before I go on with the next bit. And in this case, this clip is 6 seconds long. I'd expect it to probably take about 10 minutes to do the clip and probably another 10 minutes to load the model. Anyway, let it get on with it and let's look at the results in a minute. Now, I mentioned getting out of RAM errors. I've also had out of RAM problems if I've actually been running other programs in the background, like, for example, a screen recording program. That can actually take up enough RAM out of your graphics card that it messes it up. I actually had Edius running when I was trying to run this, and again it said it ran out of RAM, so I shut everything else down, set it running, and it produced a result. But anyway, here is the result. As you can see down here, I get the last frame of the video, but if I want to see it properly, I've got to go to where I shoved it and play that. And there you can see actually a very good result. Now, it's not exactly the same as the original. If you look at the original here, obviously we had a red flat in the background, all the files are blue, and his t-shirt is brown. But it doesn't know that. It's just guessing the colours. And just like I had with the outpainting video, if I was to do 3 shots of this guy, it would come up with different results every time, which isn't great for consistency if, say, you're doing this for a drama or something like that. But out of all the colorizing things that I've tried, this has by far the best option. All the other stuff I did, the colors were a bit smeary, they didn't necessarily follow everything all the time. This is following the guy absolutely completely. So it's a very convincing result. Another way you can look at it, by the way, is come to the Media Generator tab and it'll show you here. You can watch it in this window, but I prefer just to go and look at the original. So if we come back to this tab here, we can tweak things a little bit. Now, I did mention, if you go down to advanced mode and you go to quality, if you turn on that, and there's 2 self-refiners here. These are things which they do a bit more processing and they try and get rid of what AI people called hallucinations, or what the rest of us call mistakes. Basically, they try and make it work better. If you turn on that, I have had better results. I actually haven't fiddled very much with the other settings down here, which would be probably worth fiddling with. But just turning on that got me better results, and it kind of doubled the processing time. So if you wanted to do that, stick it on, come up to here and change the name with self-refiner, whatever. Again, the name doesn't really matter, it's just helping me. Click save, yeah, save it. And now you could come back to media flow and you could try running it again with that in it and see if you get a better result. But there are other things you can do. So if we come back to the advanced settings down here, if you go to the general tab, you get this thing here, seed. If you've ever generated particles or anything in any other program, you know there's a seed for generating randomness. So if you're generating particles, it changes the way the particles are produced. It's the same here for AI stuff. The seed will change what it starts with in the way it's actually generating stuff, and you can set it to random, so every time it'll generate something different, or you can change it to a different number. Now you do that just by typing a number in or moving the slider. Now if I do that, it's going to generate everything with that seed. No idea what the results will be like. You can see you've got millions of combinations of numbers you've got here, and I can't tell you whether that's going to produce a specific result or that's going to produce a specific result. I just know they produce different results. If you leave it on -1, it just chooses a number at random every time you do it. But if you shove it on there, it'll use that number every time, so you'll get a more consistent result between your shots. So I have set up a seed in some kind of effort to try and see if I can work out some correlation between that number and the results. I have actually put the numbers in here and then saved out a preset with that seed on it, and then come back to here, chosen it, and gone ahead and got it to run it. Again, I couldn't work out any real correlation between where I shove that slider and whether that'll be more blue or more yellow or more something else. I just did a few clips at random with different seeds, and then I chose the one that I thought produces the nicest result. But that will also help you if you're doing lots of clips. So if I had to do several clips of Ringo, it'll help them all to be the same. But that's one thing you can do, is set a specific seed. Quality here, I said I set it to 1.35. So if you up it, so let's do the same shot here with 1.5 on it. Now, to do it with 1.5, I could either go in here, put in 1.5, add in a new preset, and then go to my media flow and do something with that preset, or I could just change this slider. Because I've got it in the preset doesn't necessarily mean that you can't change the slider afterwards. Now here's the result with 1.5. It's more colourful. I do find I get a bit more blotchiness on some clips. Now, you'd have to do a few longer clips to notice it, but I do find it's probably going over the top. And the general consensus seems to be that 1.35, 1.4 is probably the best option. Again, you could just try it, see what you prefer. Yeah, going a bit too high with that can produce some peculiar results. Going very low, so if you do it to 1, here's the result with 1, hardly any colour at all. So it needs to be better than 1, but not too high. And I say 1.35 seems to be the sweet spot. The other thing you can do is actually to type something in the prompt. Let me put this to 1.35. You can actually look up online for hints as to how to write prompts for the LTX colorizer. It's generally you stick in what the scene is, try and describe the characters, and then what the general overall look should be. In this case, I am going to say there is a red. So this panel here in the background, panel behind the shelves are black, and the files behind the person are blue. Blue, shall we? The man has black hair and a brown shirt. How about that? And then you can run it again and it will come up with a different results. So let's have a look at the results with that prompt on it. Also, when I've been playing with these prompts, I've had a tendency to stick them into notepads so I can save them and then tweak them. You can also pop them into AI. You can go into ChatGPT and say, I'm trying to make up a prompt for an LTX colourising Lora. Can you change this into a better prompt? And then type in your stuff and it'll change up for you. And again, that will help. Trouble is, it seems to get so complicated. When you've got 4 or 5 people in, how do you tell it which person is which? And I haven't found a way of specifically saying, no, I want this person to be this colour and this person to be this colour. I did do something where I said, oh, there's a Scottish guy with a kilt. The kilt is red kilt with green stripes on it. And then I applied it to a variety of shots. And on the shots where the kilt didn't appear, it decided to put red and green stripes all over the place. So it can produce variable results, but that can also help to get the colorizing to come out a bit more like you want it to. Now, the other thing worth mentioning is batch processing. I did mention batch processing had been added in a recent update. Just to go over it again here in case you missed that video. First of all, you have to give stuff a name. So you actually give it a batch name. If you don't give it a batch name, it'll prompt you to do that before you actually go ahead with it. But then the next thing you do is you choose your settings. Let's go for that one. This is a thing where if I change the multiplier, so that 1.5 and change it to something else, it actually will ignore that when it does lots of clips. It'll go by the preset. So again, that's why I'm going to go for that preset and it's set to 1.35 all the time. But then what you do is you say where it's coming from and where it's going to. So I would take my videos, I put them all in their own little folder, and then I just take that folder and shove it in there. And then I put in a slash and say star full stop MP4. So that's basically saying do all the MP4 files in that directory. If I am making MOV files, I have got to come down here and shove in that and change it to MOV. So it's going to the same place but making MOV files. If I don't do that, it's going to come up with an error when I press the go button. So let's leave that off and you'll see the error. Now you wouldn't get this error if you hadn't come into configuration and changed it to MOV files. If you're doing MP4 files, it's quite happy. But say I like to make ProRes MOV files myself because I'm going to re-edit the stuff later. So let's leave it without a destination path, put it on 540p and click the go button. Bong, whole lots of errors. Main one saying I can't do ProRes with an MP4 file. And it's come up with lots of errors because it's done one error for every single file that I've got in that folder. So that's why what I've got to do is to set up an output folder. So what I could do is say, right, under here we could say make up a folder and let's copy that, shove it in here and then put in star.mov. Then it'll be happy with that. So it's saying, take everything in that folder, put it in this folder with the MOV extension. If I press the go button here, it'll be happy and it'll get on with it. And it'll just keep complaining that it's dropping a few frames on every clip. The way I'm actually doing it myself is suppose I want to colorize a whole episode of an old TV program. I'll put the entire episode into here and do it as one lump. I'll set one setting for the whole thing and I'll let it go through it, and then once it's done that, I'll look at specific bits that have gone wrong and redo those. For me, that's the simplest way to do it because I can leave it to process the whole thing overnight. If I'm putting like a 25-minute episode through on this system, it'll take probably about 24 hours to do it, which is, it's fairly long time, but it is doing 25 minutes and doing a whole bunch of magic to it. And there'll be some bits that don't come out properly, so I'll pick those bits out and redo those myself. One nice thing that I have found with this program as well is that if you are doing a long file, so you're doing a 25-minute file and it got 10 minutes through it and you really want to stop that and use your computer for something else, if you press the stop button, it'll finish the bit that it's doing right now and then keep everything up to that point, which is nice compared to something like Topaz, which will lose absolutely everything. But yeah, my tendency is to do the whole thing and then come through and then choose individual scenes that haven't worked and redo those again. Of course, doing the whole thing, it's very, very hard to put a prompt in here which tells you what color something should be throughout an entire 25-minute episode of something. So that's where you might split it down into smaller bits. Other thing worth mentioning is that you can actually do it through here. So suppose I wanted to do it through here. I'd do the same thing, set all these settings up, and I come down to here, click on control video, or just grab it from here and drop it in there, and then click the go button from here. So the downside of doing it here is that the longest that you can do is governed by this little slider here, which is up to 30 seconds. So I couldn't process an entire 25-minute thing. In terms of upside, just means you don't have to save a prompt. It makes it easier to come here and change the seed without saving a prompt and going to the next bit. Here you can set some stuff up. You can put in your text prompt if you want to. You have to be careful on this window. If you put in a text prompt and you put in some spaces like this, it'll actually do 3 separate clips. So don't put in spaces. When I got ChatGPT to make up a prompt for me, it put in those spaces. It made me 3 separate clips with 3 different settings, obviously taking 3 times as long as doing one clip. Now, so this slider here governs how long it's going to be. So if I was to set that to say 5 seconds and the clip is, what's that, 8 seconds long, it's not going to do the whole thing. So I could say, well, look, the whole thing is 205 frames. So let's just type in 205 frames and it'll do the correct length. Or what I could do is leave a really big slidery amount on here and then come down here and say control length. So if I do that, you're saying do up to 19 seconds, but it is capped by the control length. If I left this at 19 seconds and that wasn't set, it would do the 8 seconds and then it would do them again until it's done 19 seconds worth of stuff. So either set this to the right amount, and if you come up here, it will tell you what the right amount is, or set it on control length and something that's bigger than what you've actually got. And then you can click generate and it goes off and gets on with it. It can still make ProRes files from here, just like it can make MP4, but you will notice here that it's saying something up the top here, blah, 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 not supported. So with this thing, you're not actually telling it where to go. This will be put in the output directory for wan2gp. Normally what you do in this window is you'd have a result here and you click that button to download it and then save it somewhere. But you might also notice, hang on, I'm getting codec not supported, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's not good. So once you make things in here, what you have to do is to go to the output directory of wan2gp. Easiest way to do that is click on the numbers here and it should bring up the wan2gp directory. And then here you've got to go to app and then outputs. And here you've got, as you can see, loads and loads of things that I've already done. But here's the last one that I did. And if I play that one, I don't have that in there. So that's how you get to the output from this thing. Again, if I wasn't making ProRes MOV files, I wouldn't have to worry about that. I could have just clicked the download button. But really, if I'm making ProRes, which I like to do because I'm going to re-edit the stuff, then go to the output folder and then dig up that. There are also ways in here where you can control the file name, as it says here. So you can automatically name it with certain things if you want to. But primarily I actually just set up a preset and do it through MediaFlow, but you can do it through here. That's actually achieving the same thing. And now we get to the results. So a whole variety of clips. Put this one up because I think it's probably the one that worked the best. This is a shot of a leopard, obviously, and it's been completely colorized. And if you look at that, handheld camera shot, but I cannot find anything wrong with that at all. One thing you might notice is I've got black bars at the top and the bottom. As I mentioned in the previous video, it comes out to be slightly the wrong size. So the simplest way to do that is to open up in Edius here, the layouter, turn off preserve frame aspect and click that so it fits. different ways of doing that in other programs. And of course, I'm just going to have to put that on all of the clips. Because I've done it as a ProRes MOV, I can bring it straight into Edius. If I was doing an MP4 file, especially if I do a lossless MP4 file, as I did said in previous videos, it doesn't go into many editing programs, so I have to faff around with it first. So I like the ProRes as the best least compressed option. But yeah, that's not bad at all. These were actually all clips where I took out the colour and told it to put the colour back in, because any black and white footage that I've got is all copyright, hence making some of my own. But I do get the same results out of plain black and white footage. To compare that to the original, that's the colorized version. That's the original. I mean, I think the only thing that's different there is probably the post, the fence post. Probably ought to be wooden, and it isn't. Apart from that, that is flipping amazing. If we go back to Ringo here, so this is the original shot that I did. And you can say it looks fine, it looks realistic. The original looked like this. Red, totally blue files, and he's got a brown shirt on. It's also magnolia paint on the walls. But this is one where I did actually try putting it through and put some prompts on it to try and improve things. So I've got 3 different variations of that. So my first variation is what happens when you put the color down to 1. If you don't remember, in the Lora, there's this number where you put in how effective it is. This is the Lora set to 1. So it's colorized a bit, but not very much. So better than 1 is obviously important. This is just a different variation of the normal setting. So that's what my first one looked like. That's the second one. Now this is what I get if I set a prompt. So I told it that panel was red. I told it these were all blue. I told it that was black. I said the walls are magnolia. And now you can see, yeah, that has actually done something which is actually, it's pretty close to the original. So that prompt can definitely help. When the prompt's going to fall down is if you've got 5 or 6 people in shot, or it moves around a lot. It's very, very hard to do a prompt that describes absolutely everything, so it knows what colours to apply to what people. Next up, we've got me. So here's a bit of me. That's the automatic setting. So it's decided I've got grey hair, which is probably fair. I wasn't as old then as I am now, but I've got a few wrinkles, so grey hair seems sensible. Again, this is the setting if I put it down to 1. And this is the setting if I give it a bit of a prompt and say, I'm ginger and the walls are beige and I've got a sign of blue shirt. It's decided to go for a blue check shirt, which my shirt wasn't blue and check, but it's definitely got the hair colour right and the face colour a bit better. And then finally you've got this one where I said, yeah, the walls are beige. And I told it that the poster in the background was mainly blue and white. So again, fairly simple little prompt, but it does make quite a difference. Certainly gets my hair colour correct. That is actually my hair colour. So if I go back to the original variation here, that's the proper colours. And that's the colours that it's decided to do in the colorize. I think I prefer that one actually. Next up, I've got a shot of the pavilion. This was done in 4:3. Now, when I did this, I didn't tell it I was doing a 4:3 clip. I just bunged it through in a batch file with the same settings as all the others, and it still did it as 4:3. So you can see here, it's put some interesting colours on the pavilion. Pavilion is actually not that multicoloured. If I turn on the original shot, it looks like that. So I didn't bother to stick this through onto a new prompt and say, yeah, the whole building itself is a cream colour. So it's decided to pick out different colours. It is amazingly good how it picks out all these different colours and then stays with them. Next we get on to a shot outside the pavilion where I've got a bus. To me, that looks perfectly acceptable. Again, it's gone with colorizing the pavilion in lots of different colours and putting things on here, and the pavilion itself is basically all beige. But it's picked out individual people. It's picked out, look at the colours there on that. It's got blue, red, yellow, and it tracks the bus as it goes through, which of course is what should happen, but other colorizing models haven't done that. Other colorizing models have lost it a bit. And it's not perfect. Some of those colors aren't quite right. This is what the original looks like. We have red buses, not blue buses. But again, I could probably sort a lot of that out by just putting in a prompt saying that the bus has red on the back end and yellow on the front end. In this case, it actually decided on yellow on the front end, but not red on the back. Next one I tried was this shot, which is an aeroplane, handheld, wobbly shot in the sky. I did wonder to myself, how is that going to work? And I mean, it's tracking the aeroplane as it wobbles around, but it hasn't put the proper colours onto the aeroplane. It's just decided to go with blues and purples. So I thought I'll give it a prompt and tell it to make it some RAF colours. So this here is the same shot with the little prompt saying make it the colours of the RAF. So I guess I should have been more specific and saying make it the brown and green colours of the RAF, because presumably the RAF did blue ones. What it has done is tracked them really nicely through the shot. And the final shot I've got here is a shot of an amphitheatre in Turkey. I think it's Ephesus. Again, it's just a handheld shot, and it's picked out huge amounts of these details. Look at all these little colours going on here in various places. All these stones that are being picked out, and they carry on going through the whole shot. So again, it's making the colours stick exactly to there. Now, it might not be doing the right colours. If I put on the real version, you'll notice it wasn't nearly that colourful. So I could try running that through again and saying, look, all the stones are variations of beige as opposed to colour, and maybe it'll do that better. But what it has done is given it something that's acceptable. If I didn't know that those things weren't those colours, I wouldn't have minded. Now, this particular shot is 13 seconds long. So if you watch it now, about here, you'll notice there's a little change there. And that little change is what happens when you have a sliding window or a chunk. So I set these so that there wasn't any overlap at all. So it's only one frame. And as a result, when you get to the join there, there's a slight jerk. If you set that to have an overlap of 9 frames or 17 frames, you hopefully wouldn't notice that slight change. But yeah, I think staggeringly good results, particularly that one. Because obviously it's been trained. It's been trained on different videos, which means it's been trained on real life. If you give it stuff which is not from real life, like I have been trying to do old episodes of a science fiction program, it doesn't really know what they are at all, so it's just guessing randomly. You get a shot of a cheetah against grass, it knows what grass is, it knows what a cheetah looks like, and it colours them accordingly. You give it a shot of a bus and a building, yeah, it's coloured them in perfectly acceptable colours, it just doesn't know that the pavilion doesn't have purple things up there and that bus should be red. But they are acceptable colours. Final thing to point out is some of these shots were done in the batch encoder, and some of these shots were done in the media tab. First of all, you can tell the difference because if you look at the files themselves, some of them have this written on it and some of them have the original names. The original names are what you get if you use the batch encoder. This is the computer itself deciding to name stuff. As a default, it'll just give it a name of the time and the seed and then the first bit of your text prompt, which means I can't actually tell which one's which. Now, you can change a bit on what it does there. But that's not the end of the world. I can live with that. The other thing you won't have noticed as I'm playing this stuff back is the frame rate. All the clips done in the media generator are 24 frames a second. All the clips done in the media flow are 25. Now, why is that? The media flow will basically take the clips and make them exactly the same as the original. Media generator is based on these settings, and I forgot to change a setting. Since I set this all up, I've restarted wan2gp, so if I want to get back to where I was, I can just go up to here and choose one of these colorizers and apply it, and that immediately gives me the same settings I saved. But then coming down here to the advanced section, if I go to MISC, it's got what the frame rate is of the clips that it created, and I forgot to change that to 25 frames a second. So the default, what it was trained on, was 24 frames a second. I haven't noticed any major differences if I change it to 25, and of course I want to keep them as 25 because that's what they are. But I should have changed that before I processed anything in this tab. I didn't have to change it to make a preset in the media flow because it just took the stuff from the original media, but I did have to change it here and I forgot to do that, which is why those are 24 and not 25. Now, having done that, I need to put back up here and then save that again. So now that preset has been updated, so it's going to be 25 frames a second from now on. But I say, wouldn't have affected you if you'd used that preset in here anyway. It only affects you in this bit. What you need is a pretty good computer, decent graphics card, bit of RAM, so at least 32 gig of RAM on your computer, preferably more. Fairly recent processor. I'm using this either on a 9900K processor or a 14700K processor. So that's one that's about 5 years old, and that's another one that's a couple of years old. And a decent graphics card. It has to be NVIDIA, and it might work on ATIs, but all the AI stuff is programmed primarily for NVIDIA graphics cards. So an NVIDIA graphics card and a fairly recent one. Like I said, I'm using a 3060 on this particular system that I'm filming this. My other system's got a 5060 Ti. The nice thing about 5060 Ti is it's got 16 gig of RAM on it, and it really, really likes having lots of RAM, this stuff. I would love to run this on a system with the best graphics card I could get, like a 1590, which would have 24 gig of RAM. Those graphics cards are currently £3,000. So somebody wants to give me £3,000, I would love it. I'd probably spend it on a holiday rather than the graphics card, but I still love to be able to cough up £3,000 for a really nice graphics card. There are even professional NVIDIA cards which have got 96 gig of RAM on them. They come in about £14,000. And yeah, I can't tell you how much better they'll make the system because I can't afford to try it out. What I'm doing on a 3060, which I've had for a few years, and a 5060 Ti. Anyway, hope you found that video useful. Obviously, got any questions, get in touch, david@dvctraining.co.uk, or if you want me to make a system for you so you can fiddle around with this stuff, get in touch. My website is www.dvctraining.co.uk. Don't forget to like the video, which obviously helps me with my YouTubering and getting other people to see this. And subscribe to the channel for more videos, and I'll see you next time.